Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. One of the commandments in this week's Torah portion says, do not afflict, cause pain to the widow and to the orphan. And then God says, Im aneh taneh oto. If afflict, you will afflict the widow or the orphan. Sa'ok yitzak elai. Cry, they will cry out to me. And shamoa eshmat sakasam. Hear, I will hear their cry to me. And then God says, I will kill you, and your wives will become widows, and your children will become orphans, as a punishment for afflicting, persecuting a widow or an orphan. And our rabbis ask, why is it that every adjective is doubled, repetitive? The verse says, if afflict, you shall afflict the widow and the orphan. Cry, they will cry out to me. Hear, I shall hear their cry, and my anger will flare up against you. And the Kotzker Rebbe answers that any time you afflict and cause pain to another human being, they cry out to God, and God hears their cry. But when you afflict a widow or an orphan, God says it's a double affliction, and therefore they cry out doubly in pain. And therefore I hear their cry doubly. Why? Because when you afflict the widow and the orphan who are vulnerable, who are sensitive, and are suffering, not only do you cause them pain, but they say to themselves, you know, the widow says, if my husband was alive, he would defend me, he would stand up for me. They wouldn't treat me this way if my husband was here. And the orphan says, if I had a father, they wouldn't do this to me, and my father would protect me. And so therefore you cause them a double pain, the pain of the affliction and the remembrance of the fact that they're vulnerable and without their father or mother or spouse. And of course, when you read these words in this week's Torah portion, we today, as a day of tragic mourning for the Jewish people, as we watch the way the bodies of Shiri and her two children return, together with Ohad Lipschitz, from captivity in Gaza after 15 months. And we've come to pray every day for them to return, because we saw the fear in Shiri's eyes as a mother, the terror, as she was being taken off by Hamas terrorists, clutching her two sons, trying to protect her children from this evil. And now they come back to their husband and father, Yardain, in coffins, and Yardain has to receive his wife and children and bury them and live with the pain of the loss of his beloved wife and children for the rest of his life. And we think about this verse in this week's Torah portion. We say, Almighty God, those who cause innocent children to be killed, not just to be orphans, but fathers to be without children and a father to be without his wife, fulfill this verse and kill these terrorists, destroy them, so that their wives will be orphans and their children, their wives will be widows and their wives' children will be orphans. But if God says, I will doubly punish those who afflict pain on innocent orphans and widows, the true is the reverse as well. That those who are compassionate and kind to the widows and the orphans will hear God, they will bless those who are compassionate and loving to them, and thank God for the kindness of those who help them. And God will hear their blessing for those who help them. And God will send a double blessing and reward to those who help the widows and the orphans. Because God says, I love those who are most vulnerable, the widows and the orphans. They are my children. And that is what we're seeing today. Jews around the world are standing and crying, watching the way Shiri and her children are coming back in coffins. And the outpouring of love and unity and support for Yardain Bibas and for every widow and orphan in Israel is unparalleled in the amount of unity and love that we have for one another. And therefore God should look down and see the Jewish people and our love and our compassion, and how there's not a dry eye in Israel today, because we feel like it's our children and our family member that was murdered. And therefore God should bless us for our love, for our compassion, for caring for those who are most in pain and in anguish. And so let us strengthen ourselves and as a Jewish people continue to show this tremendous love to one another. And may we see the destruction of our enemies and the triumph and the success and the ultimate victory of the Jewish people. May it be a day of mourning, of prayer, and solidarity.